Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah, wa ba'd. So we left off at verse 113 and we're on section 17 actually. So continuing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ وَرَحْمَتُهُ لَهَمَّت طَّائِفَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ أَن يُضِلُّوكَ وَمَا يُضِلُّونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُمْ. Alright, so Allah says, had it not been for Allah's grace and mercy on you, so I'm going to follow through the Arabic for you. لَهَمَّت طَّائِفَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ أَن يُضِلُّوكَ وَمَا يُضِلُّونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُمْ. Then a group of them would have tried to mislead you, or here it says deceive you. So basically what Allah is saying is that had it not been for Allah's grace and Allah's mercy on you, talking to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. If you didn't have the mercy of Allah in this specific instance, now of course the Prophet always has the mercy of Allah. The Prophet always has the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if he didn't in this situation, there was a group of people who were trying to plot to mislead the Prophet. Now how are they plotting to mislead the Prophet? The enemies of Islam are always trying to mislead the Prophet. But if you remember the previous week, we were looking at verses which were talking about the Prophet being in the role of a judge. And the problem is when you make false accusations against somebody else, they're trying to get the Prophet to make a wrong judgment against somebody who is innocent. So it's talking about making a wrong judgment. وَمَا يَضُرُّونَكَ مِن شَيْءٍ. They says nor can they harm you at all in any way. So basically it says they would only misguide themselves, right? وَمَا يُضِلُّونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُم. They only misguide themselves. So in the past, people have tried to trick the Prophet, and they failed. And in the future, if they try to misguide him again, they're going to fail again. And then it says they don't harm anyone except themselves. So, it says they cannot harm you at all. So how can they not harm the Prophet? Let me ask you a question. Could the Prophet ever have been harmed? When it says right here, I'll give you the translation. Nor can they harm you in the least. This is the translation of Mustafa Khattab. I made my own translation, but nor can they harm you in the least. Does that mean that the Prophet can never be harmed? Was the Prophet ever harmed? Physically? Yes, if Allah wills. And was he harmed physically? Yes, he was harmed physically. So in this case, it's not talking about just physical harm. It's talking specifically about the case we're discussing here. And the case we're discussing here is that the Prophet would make a wrong judgment and declare somebody who is innocent to be guilty. Like for example, just recently, the Supreme Court of one of the states sentenced one of the Muslims to the death penalty. And his last statement was, everything is in Allah's control, and there's good evidence to show that there was something wrong with his case and it shouldn't have happened, but they sentenced him to the death penalty anyway. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah knows the best, may Allah forgive our brother, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for him. But these are the type of things that happen. People make wrong judgments and then they get punished even if you're innocent, or you haven't done the crime as they're claiming that you've done that crime. So it's talking about being protected from making a wrong judgment in this case. And then it says, let me get back to Arabic, وَأَنزَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَعَلَّمَكَ مَا لَمْ تَكُنْ تَعْلَمْ. Allah has revealed to you the book and the wisdom and taught you what you never knew. So the book is referring to what? The Quran. And the wisdom is referring to kind of like hadith. So the wisdom that the Prophet has got about explaining the Quran and teaching the Quran, so this is known as like the sunnah or the hadith or something like that. So if Allah has given him the book and the wisdom, it means that you're not going to be making these type of mistakes because you have a criteria for guidance. It's not that he can never make a single mistake ever, but you're less likely to make a mistake if you have the revelation from Allah. And he taught you, where did it go? And he taught you what you never knew. right? What is the things that the Prophet didn't know or that people cannot find out? We're talking about the higher truths in life. Why have we been created? What is our purpose? What are we supposed to do? These are things that the Prophet could not know on his own, and these are things that other people would not be able to figure out on their own either. وَكَانَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ عَظِيمًا. Indeed, Allah's favor upon you is great. He's talking to the Prophet and saying, you know what? Your success, even the Prophet's success in life, everything that he got in his life, his victories and his success and everything, it's all from the favor of Allah. It's all from the grace of Allah. That's a very important lesson, by the way, because sometimes if we're successful in our own life, if you're successful in your business, you're doing really good in school, you get into a good university, sometimes we say, you know what, it's because of me. I worked really hard and I'm really smart and I'm very clever and all of those things. Maybe you played some role, no doubt, but most of it is from the favor and the blessing of Allah on you. And if the Prophet himself, Allah is telling him that, you know what, all this, whatever success you have, it's from Allah's blessing to you, it applies even more to our situation. And then the next verse. لا خير في كثير من نجواهم إلا من أمر بصدقة أو معروف أو إصلاح بين الناس. There is no good or there's no benefit in most of their secret talks. So there is actually referring to all of humanity. People engage in secret talks, right? People have secret meetings. They sit down at nighttime and they have like a little whispering conversation about something. So here, basically, there's two statements being made. One, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking of people in general, humankind in general. People who do these secret talks, there's really not much good in what they do because it's talking about bad secretive talks. And there was one specific group in Medina that used to plot against the Muslims. And when they would plot in secret. They wouldn't openly say what they're doing. They would secretly get together and say, let's say the Prophet's going to do this. Let's say Islam is like this. What are those group of people called? In Medina. The Quraysh were openly the enemies of the Muslims from Mecca. They were like, yeah, we're going to kill you when we get a chance, and we hate you. They're like, if we had to take an example today, they're like the conservatives, the ultra-conservatives of this country. When they say they hate Islam, they say it openly. We hate Muslims, and this and that. And then you got this other group who are more on the liberal side. When they hate Islam, they do it very stealthily, in a very secretive manner, right? So there's this other group in Medina that's doing things, they smile in your face, but then they plot against you secretly at nighttime. What's that group? Yeah. The munafiqeen, exactly, the hypocrites. These are the munafiqeen. And they're plotting at night. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying those secret gatherings and meetings and talks and the whispers that they're doing, there's no good in those things. In general and specific to this group over here. إِلَّا مَنْ أَمَرَ بِصَدَقَةٍ أَوْ مَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ إِصْلَاحٍ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Except those who encourage charity and they encourage kindness, they encourage reconciliation between people. Now were the munafiqeen doing that? No, of course not. So the verse, it's a little bit difficult verse to understand. It's a very simple verse. It's like one sentence. But you have to understand Allah is addressing two people at once in the same verse. He's addressing all people. Out of all humanity, people have secret talks. And usually we're talking about people who have bad secret talks. There's nothing good in what they're saying. They're sitting there and they're whispering and they're just doing bad stuff. Like the hypocrites of Medina and anyone else in the world who does these secret meetings to cause problems. But then he's saying, if you were going to have a meeting, if you were going to have secret conversation, then you should have a secret conversation for good things like encouraging charity, kindness, and reconciling between people. Why would you have to do that in secret? Why would you encourage people to give charity secretly? Why not openly do that? Yes, Yasmin. Okay. Doesn't really sound nice. Okay. There's another reason. Okay, so charity done privately is actually safer because it protects your niyyah, protects your intention, right? So it keeps you humble. So when you go and you encourage somebody else to give charity or something like that privately, that's one of those things that it's best done privately if possible. Kindness in general, reconciling between people, sometimes you need to have a meeting and to say, you know what, that person, I know he said some bad things, but he actually likes you. He actually talks good about you, and you try to somehow bring people together. Some of those talks need to be done privately. So Allah is saying basically all the secret talks that are done for purposes of good, those are the type of meetings you should be doing in secret. Don't have these secret meetings to cause problems and cause so many issues and so many other things. وَمَن يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ وَمَن يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ وَمَن يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ فَسَوْفَ نُؤْتِيهِ أَجْرًا عَظِيمًا. So whoever does this seeking Allah's pleasure, then we will grant them a great reward. So your intention should be seeking the pleasure of Allah. That's the best intention that you can possibly have in anything that you do. وَمَن يُشَاقِقِ الرَّسُولَ مِن بَعْدِ مَا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُ الْهُدَى وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Whoever opposes the messenger after guidance has become clear to them, meaning they know what is right and what is wrong, and they follow a path other than that of the believers, نُوَلِّهِ مَا تَوَلَّى وَنُصْلِهِ جَهَنَّمَ. Where to go? We will let them follow what they have chosen, and then we will burn them in the hellfire. وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. What a horrible destination, or what a horrible ending that they're going to have. So it's basically saying that, you know what, anyone who continues to plot against the Muslims, plot against the Messenger of Allah, and it should be clear to them that what is right and what is wrong, these are the people who are going, Allah is going to, He's not going to force them to do what's right. Allah is going to let people make the mistake, and then they're going to be punished later on. Now, one thing I want to call your attention to here, it says, وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. It says, the person who doesn't follow the way of the believers. Now, He could have said, Allah could have said, the way of Islam. Allah could have said, following the truth. Allah could have said, following the Quran. But He specifically said, following the way of the believers. That's very significant because it means that the believers are supposed to have an identity. They're like a group. All believers in the world, anyone who says La ilaha illallah and is on the truth, they are like one group. And they're supposed to be a group. There's a certain path that they all follow together. And anyone who follows any other path, they're like different groups. It's very important to be in the group of the believers. There's certain manners. There's certain characteristics. There's a certain way of behaving that believers behave that differentiates them from the people who follow the path of non-believers. And that's very important because it's really important for us to have the identity of a Muslim, of a believer, of a mu'min. You can't just be like, I'm just like everybody else out there. And you think, I'm just going to act like everybody else. I'm going to dress like everyone else. I'm going to behave like everyone else. But Islam is in my heart. If you try to behave like everybody else, and you just keep Islam only in your heart, and it's just like it doesn't show, it's like something that's just in your mind, you're fooling yourself, because you're naturally going to automatically start to acclimate and change your behavior to become like other people that you are acting like, people that you admire. It's like if you follow a certain type of music, if you follow a certain group of celebrities, you watch everything that they do. You watch every single move. Where do they go and eat? Where do they, what kind of clothes do they wear? And you're following them. You're naturally going to start to incline to wanting to be like them. And that's not the path of the believers. Now, the believers in general, as a whole, they have a certain way of doing things, a certain way of thinking about things. So if you have to identify which group do you want to be in, if you want to be in the group of believers, you're going to naturally start to automatically incline towards becoming like that. If you're going to want to be in a group, of a different group, you're naturally going to start to become like that other group. إن الله لا يغفر أن يشرك به ويغفر ما دون ذلك لمن يشاء. Allah does not forgive associating others with Him in worship. I really struggle to translate the word shirk. It's the most important concept in Islam, and it's the hardest word to translate. So my translation is, Allah does not forgive claiming that He has a partner. Shirk means that you think that Allah has a partner. So Allah is all powerful. And if you say, you know what, there's somebody else has 1% of the power, Allah has 99% of all the power in the world, and somebody else has 1%. 1% partnership. That is the biggest sin that anyone can make. If you say Allah has the knowledge of everything, but then, you know what, there's like 1%, or somebody else has knowledge of like 1%, and Allah only has knowledge of 99%. Any type of partnership in any type of quality that Allah has is called shirk. It's called, how did I translate it? No, I did not translate it as polytheism. Claiming that Allah has a partner. Associating partners, just it seems like too, it's not clear. So basically claiming that Allah has a partner in anything, in His power, in His respect, in the way that you should be worshiping Him, all of that is the biggest sin. So Allah will never forgive that sin of what's called shirk. Saying that Allah has a partner in anything, saying that anyone is equivalent in any way, even 1% to Allah. But He'll forgive anything else to whomever He will. مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَن يَشَاءُ. Now that could mean two things. It could mean that Allah completely forgives another sin because if somebody commits it. Or it could mean that after some punishment, Allah will forgive that person of the sin. وَمَن يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ ضَلَّ ضَلَالًا بَعِيدًا. Whoever claims a partner with Allah has clearly gone far off track. Basically, they've gone away from the truth, away from the right way, and they're going to be punished because of that. The last verse we'll cover. يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِهِ إِلَّا إِنَاثًا وَإِن يَدْعُونَ إِلَّا شَيْطَانًا مَرِيدًا. Instead of Allah, they only call upon, or they only pray to, female gods. And actually, they only call upon, or they only pray to, no one but a rebellious Satan. So it's talking about the idol worshippers. And the idol worshippers, it's saying that they just pray to female gods. Many of the gods that the idol worshippers in Arabia used to pray to, they were female. So like Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, Manat. These are all the names of idols, and these were called the daughters of God. So they would say these are Banatullah, the daughters of Allah. And they would pray to them. And so Allah is calling them out and saying, look, not only are you not praying to Allah, not only are you making idols, but many of these idols, you're saying that they're females. You've somehow given a gender to these idols. And this is not only an Arabian thing. This was not an Arab pagan thing. Other religions, they used to believe, people used to pray to the sun in the past, and they prayed to the moon. The sun was viewed as being feminine. In fact, even in Arabic, the word shams is still feminine. But they used to view the sun as being feminine somehow. They also viewed the moon as being feminine, although in Arabic it's not. There was something throughout history, different religions throughout the world, they would set up goddesses. And many of them are goddesses, like in South India, the Hindus. If you look at most of the local idols that they would set up, the majority of them, overwhelming majority of the gods that they would worship are female. And this is something that still existed today. You probably didn't really think about it much. But if you think about it, we hear this all the time. You go to university, you go to high school, your science teacher will be like, look, Mother Nature has caused these cheetahs to, reproduce in the wild or whatever. Every time you hear the word Mother Nature this and Mother Nature that. Have you ever wondered where did this term Mother Nature come from? Because they don't want to say the word God, especially not in California, maybe in Alabama or something like that. But why Mother Nature? And if they're going to disbelieve in God, why don't they just say nature, right? Of course, it should be Allah. Allah created everything, right? But they don't even say that. They use this term Mother Nature. And the problem is Muslims start to use the same thing. I hear it all the time. Oh, Mother Nature has done this and Mother Nature has done that. The reality is the idea or the concept of Mother Nature is that the earth is like a mother. This originates in Greek mythology. And this actually has its origins in idol worship. So there was a Greek goddess named Gaia. Gaia was the ancestral mother of all life on earth. And that's where this idea of Mother Nature comes in. Where if you use the word Mother Nature, you are literally using a Greek goddess concept that has been inherited into the civilization. And you're referring back to it without even realizing. So that's why we need to be careful as Muslims. And we should also be among the people who question. We ask questions. We say, hey, why do they call it Mother Nature? And why do they use this term? And as Muslims, we should always use the word Allah. That's one of the reasons why we should have Islamic schools. I mean, if this is, hopefully it's not happening, but if you have an Islamic school and you have teachers teaching in there science, and they're not what's called the Islamization of knowledge. If they're not Islamizing the knowledge that they're teaching, then it's not an Islamic school. It's a Muslim school. It's just a school with Muslims. That's like Portola High School. Like 100 people, there are a lot of Muslims there, mashallah. That doesn't make it an Islamic school. So it's very important for us to go back and teach things from a proper Islamic manner. So anyways, inshallah, we'll break here and we'll open it up for the Kahoot. I'll open it up for questions while the Kahoot is being loaded. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Jabir. There are cookies? Yes, there are cookies. Yes, we have to change the time next week. So next week we'll switch to 7:15. Inshallah, 7:15. Yes, Yasmin, go ahead. Yes. So you're talking about modern dialects today in terms of Egyptian Arabic and Syrian Arabic. So technically the Arabic of the Quran is called Fusha, it's a classical Arabic. But in the past, when the Quran was revealed, there were also dialects as well. So when there were dialects at that time, everyone start joining while I answer this question. So there were dialects at the time. There was a dialect of the Quraysh, there was a dialect of the Yemenis and all of that. So what ended up happening is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the Quran in different ways that you could actually read in different dialects. But in terms of the writing and the script of the Quran was from the dialect of the Quraysh because that's what was compiled. But there's a combination and a mixture of different dialects in the actual Quran. Did that answer the question? Okay, alhamdulillah.